Good morning, everybody. My name is Robert Watkins. I am going to be moderating today's meeting on the virtual side of things. I'm city staff. Welcome to the August 2021 Historic Resources Committee meeting. For members of the public who might be watching on our streaming channels, if you wish to provide any public comment for the call, you can register for the meeting on the city calendar, which is on the city website, and you can sign up for the Zoom call, or there's also an option to call in through your phone. There's a public comment section at the beginning of the meeting. Yeah, just do that if you wish to say anything. Other than that, we have a pretty full agenda. I don't remember if I say anything else normally, so I can pass things on to Phil Varner, the chair of the committee.
Okay, I call this meeting of the Historic Resources Committee to order. Let's start with a roll call of who's present. Robert, do you want to take that?
Sure, just let me, I need to pull up the roster. One sec. So I will just go through the names and please say here. Sally Duncan emailed me as she will be joining late. Heather Hill will also be joining late. Genevieve Keller. Here. Jessica Livingston will be later, won't be attending. Rachel Lloyd.
Present.
Margaret O'Brien won't be able to attend. Jelaine Schmidt doesn't look like she's here yet. Kay Slaughter. Kay is here. Dee Dee Smith.
Here, and I will need to leave at 12:30 if we're not done yet, and I apologize for an appointment.
Okay. Hopefully we finish with the walking tour map discussion before then, and Phil Varner.
Sure.
And we should also be joined, hopefully, by my colleague, Jeff Werner. I know he'll be logging on pretty soon.
Okay, let's proceed with public comment.
I'll read the policy. The public comment policy, at the beginning of each meeting, not more than 10 minutes will be allowed for the introduction of any guests and public comments. Speakers may speak for a maximum of 2 minutes and shall begin by identifying their name and address. So with that, if you wish to provide comment, please raise your hand, or if you're calling in, press *9, and I will allow you to speak. So, Mr. Chair, we have 3 members in the queue. None of them are raising their hand. So I think we might be able to move on.
Okay, sounds good. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes or amendments that they wish to make to the agenda?
Not, I move to approve.
I'm not sure if we have quorum. Isn't quorum 50% plus 1?
Yeah, we
have we have 5.
That mean we can't approve the agenda?
Oh wait, no. Here's somebody else. The nick of
quorum,
time.
Elaine, quorum.
If I remember correctly, you can approve the agenda without quorum. You just can't vote on anything else.
Yeah. Well, now we're good anyway. So.
Okay. Well, if there's this few people here, then, you know, it kind of signals that maybe folks are on vacation.
We're going to have a few people that are late. So I think we're going to we're going to get better as the meeting goes on.
Cool. All right.
Okay. So Didi made a motion and Kay seconds. With a visual or a voice indicate your approval of this agenda.
Approved.
Yep, that's everyone.
Okay, so the agenda passes unanimously. Yeah, moving on to the meeting notes.
Does anybody have any changes or additions that they'd like to see in the meeting notes from last month?
a question, actually. When we talked about bringing Mabel Wilson in, we talked both about a work session and about just inviting her to talk to us briefly about process. And I wasn't sure if that was still on the table or encapsulated in those minutes. I just couldn't quite tell. And I just wondered too, what the, where that stood.
When I rewatched the video, there were just a lot of different discussions. So I would appreciate any clarity in what you as a committee decided, and I can change the minutes to reflect that.
I'm not sure they really need to be changed. I did just want to say that out loud because we did talk about doing that soon. And you could call it a work session. and maybe it is the same thing. But I just wanted to make sure that was still in the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's still in the conversation, and we'll hopefully talk more about that today. Okay, could I get a motion to approve the meeting notes?
So moved.
Dee motions and Kay seconds. And with a voice or visual, please vote on this. What am I supposed to say?
All in favor.
All in favor, right. That's unanimous.
Okay.
And next item up is Court Square. I think the main items from this are staff is looking for a, sorry, let me just bring up the actual agenda, which has more information on it than I have in my notes. Staff is looking for a project goal, and there was a recommendation of some language that we may want to base a goal on, and then coming up with a plan for next steps and dates and other related things, and then also updates on whether or not Dr. Wilson would be interested in working with us and what we can do about that. As usual, I guess I'll pass it to Jelaine, since she probably has more information about what we should do next and where we are right now.
And specifically on what specifics?
Well, I guess the place to start would probably be where we are right now and what you think are the next steps and what a timeline should look like.
I was remiss in all the hubbub about statue removal, and then I went on vacation and have been busy. I have not gotten a hold of Mabel Wilson, so okay. I apologize for that. I will do that right after this meeting. And we had talked about her talking with us either during a regularly scheduled meeting, or if not possible, then sometime during a work session, an announced work session, to kind of get an idea about how to conduct community engagement process since she has experience doing that with the UVA Monument for Enslaved Laborers, and how that, just so that we can have some pointers on how that might look like for the city to do something like that for the slave auction block. How to, I don't want to even say monument or memorial, but how to mark that space, because it as yet undetermined, and we want to leave our minds open and stuff, and for input, how that might inform a process. So the goal is to hear from her about how that went, tips that she has, things that she learned from that process with the MEL at UVA. With the possibility of when thinking about going forward with that, perhaps having her involved and, in that, should she be interested in that, So that was my understanding of what we spoke about, and I apologize that I dropped that ball.
That's totally fine. So I guess the question then is, if we want to engage her on what our process should be, are we even in a position right now to develop next steps, like a online survey or in-person meetings or a timeline?
I just, if this would help, I'm sorry, I just tell you that the city has, we've been looking at in-person meetings, resuming in September. That's all been pushed back. They say, October, but I think it's sort of like last year where everything was a month at a time and just kept scooching forward. So I don't know. I don't think any of us know. I think all of us are in a little bit of a haze over all of this, but I suspect that any sort of in-person engagement is probably off the table for at least the foreseeable future. So I just put that in there as we talk about it.
Yeah.
Is there any other supporting research or something that we can do that might feed into the overall process, and things that we could do ahead of meetings?
Yes, and I wanted to add something on that, something that I did push forward on, which is that the Memory Project, which is under the Democracy Initiative at the University of Virginia, and I direct the Memory Project. We are going to fund 2 student researchers to go to the archives and basically start digging, because and this would be paid for out of UVA funds, so at no cost to the city. And so what this would do, and we put out a call for applicants, and we've already got lots of very good candidates, graduate students in history, that are saying, yeah, I'd like to work on this public history project. So we would send them to the archives, first consulting with the CVHR, Central Virginia Historical Researchers folks, and also with Burke Brown Stepp, to just kind of see where the, literal and figurative bodies are buried, in terms of archival research, and to kind of follow in Gail Schulman's, work, that's been started, and especially start looking at court square sales, so digging through, bills of sale, probates, wills, et cetera, in order to kind of build some sort of database, to have. And this would be, I spoke with Andrea Douglas about this, because there are several kind of simultaneous projects that are going on that are like this here locally. One is, of course, at the University of Virginia, where Dr. Shelley Murphy, a genealogist, is doing work there to identify descendants of enslaved workers. So that's one. Another one, which Andrea is doing at the Jefferson School in tandem with some local descendants groups, is to just kind of general, looking around. I mean, and they're just, kind of looking for just real basics, names, dates, places, that sort of thing, just to try to gather as much information as possible. So there's the specific thing at UVA for, looking for descendants of workers, enslaved workers at UVA. And then there's the kind of general thing with descendants, and Andrea doing that. And they're trying to work out, that is Andrea and descendants are trying to work out where such a database might be housed, that would be accessible, kind of owned, if you will, or something, or, kind of by the Jefferson School, but housed, perhaps at UVA, with their kind of capacities, library and digital capacities. None of this is worked out yet. This is, kind of what they're pursuing. So those are 2 projects that would be going on. And then the one I'm proposing, where I want to get a graduate student and also an undergrad, because the UVA President's Commission on Slavery in the university has kind of a training program that they do to train student researchers, to do this kind of archival digging, that needs to happen. I mean, of course, the President's Commission and Shelley Murphy have a lot of experience with this already, having kind of plumbed the archives at UVA to get as much information as they have, but they're always trying to get more. So what I would like to propose with the committee's proposal is that that these two researchers, both an undergrad and a graduate student researcher, start gathering this information in cooperation with these other projects that are going on, so that we're not recreating the wheel, so that we're working kind of in tandem with one another, and also sharing not everything that the researchers from the memory project would want to run across might be applicable to a project for Court Square sales, but say they're going to run across other things that might be applicable to UVA's search or Andrea and the Descendants search, etc. You know what I mean? So just kind of be coordinating with that, but then with the goal of, with this specific body of research about Court Square slave sales, to have this graduate student researcher then in consultation with us, of course, and maybe with whoever else that we get here, to write a report about what they're finding, and I mean have kind of periodic presentations as well as to Descendants and also just the general public about what they're after a few months kind of gathering research, kind of what they're learning along the way, maybe getting feedback and stuff too, and then crafting some sort of report to present to City Council next year, probably in the spring, because these students would be starting in the fall semester doing this. So this would be kind of like a work study type position or something like that, 10 or 15 hours a week or whatever. And so I don't know what people think about that, or if that is a way for Historic Resources Committee to contribute, as you were saying, Rachel, what can we do ongoing, a way to contribute to pushing this forward, a way that is of no cost actually to the city, and yet is in the service of informing the city about just gathering more data, names, dates, places, etc. So I don't know what people think of that, if that would be a helpful thing, but I was trying to, in listening to what the Descendants were saying in our preliminary community engagement sessions, the 3 of them that we had this summer, they were saying they wanted it to be this, any kind of sort of, I don't know, memorial, marker, monument, whatever it might be, to be significant, physically significant, and also educational, and so I think, the Monument for Enslaved Laborers at UVA is a good example of that. It's a physically beautiful space. It has a wonderful sense of symbolism, that contributes to the overall narrative, and it's also educational, with the sorts of etchings that it has and that sort of thing. So anyway, so I don't know what people think of that. That was a lot. Sorry, took up a lot of time. But that's what I'm working on right now.
And has the memory project posted this position yet, or posted this research position? Or
what we've done is we have put out feelers to history professors basically around grounds and said, hey, do you have students, who are working on, projects related to slavery and enslavement, who are good archival researchers, to recommend to us. And we've heard back, a lot of, very interested inquiries from such students. And so we're going to start, kind of looking at candidates. So no, it's not kind of posted yet. The undergrad might be, this is something that, like, when the semester begins, might be something that gets posted in a kind of intra UVA, I can't remember what it's called, where the handshake, I think it's called UVA, that looking for student workers.
Well, I think a few things. One, I think it's great that you're already looking for a public sharing forum for the information. I think that's really critical, whether it goes on a website and where it's housed, I don't think necessarily matters, but just to make sure that all the information is publicly available is great. And then, I think this kind of information will be a great complement to the kind of oral history and other information that comes out through direct descendant engagement. So I think that's all super. I mean, I know when we were doing the Blue Ribbon Commission report, there was a lot of emphasis from the community that we needed to share history, and everyone needed to make sure it was not sugar-coated, that it was real. So I think this is all important, and I think it's a good effort.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and the not sugarcoating and having real data too, and also, which, what I see at the Monument for Enslaved Labor, kind of highlighting the, creativity and how these folks were human beings first, and they had, gifts and talents and relationships and stuff like that. So anything we can do like that, especially highlighting relationships, I think, and the sorts of skills that folks had, or, reported to have had, or recorded to have had, will be good. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's, on the one hand, it's a, it's a tragedy, but we don't want to leave it at that, but to also, to try as much as possible to highlight this thing. And I think the Monument for Enslaved Laborers, again, is kind of an example of that,
If I could suggest, so there's, I circulated that downtown parks RFP. And I think I finally understand too, why there were two, but I haven't received any information on if that is going to be reinitiated. Robert and I have a meeting on Monday afternoon, might be able to learn a little bit more. And I believe we can coax things along maybe a little bit too. But so one thing I think, and I hope I expressed it in my email, is the committee can make a recommendation to council that these, so what the things Jelane's talking about are important, and they can stand alone and support a lot of things, but they can directly contribute to what the city contemplates for those spaces. And then with that, also a recommendation that how those spaces are designed, the committee can recommend, how that be approached. And I think there's also to say, and incorporate into that RFP, or as a separate RFP, something separate related to Court Square if necessary, or Number Nothing if necessary. So I think that sort of would be the remedy, I think, for the commission, for you all to do, is to make a recommendation to council of when you do this, incorporate this, please, or please consider doing this outside of that. And then this kind of went at that question about the goal, and to make the statement that the committee is in the process of gathering, collecting, reviewing, and with that, we will be making a recommendation. The committee will be making a recommendation to city council. So if that helps frame it a little bit, use those, I can go to make better notes of it, but think all of this towards, and we can do something again separate completely, but it is the opportunity with that RFP language to recommend something to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I would say that we have two aspects to that. One is the fact that we want to have some sort of specific memorialization that we're working towards on this, but also incorporating enslavement and human trafficking into all the other spaces and how it's related to them. Like specifically, the Robert E. Lee statue sits on a site that was the South Hall Venable house, where that was a plantation and a major slaveholding family, and then Jackson Park, reforming that and having that can be a center for other information about what we know about slavery in Court Square. And so we have these two things. I think we have these two things of a specific memorialization and incorporating all of those things into the numerous other sites around Court Square that we're working on, including the new court building, and specifically Swan Tavern and Eagle Tavern, which have not really gotten as much prominence for their role in this either. So anyway, I think those two things are probably something that those RFPs would point to in making sure that that part of the story is incorporated into those spaces.
Yeah, Right. Yeah, I think that totally makes sense, that as the city, is looking at, kind of, remaking or, these grounds, the parks that we, think kind of expansively there, I think about, Courthouse, Court Square, and seeing if, we can get that to, into the, while you're doing this, don't lose sight of, the kind of overall environs,
So what that does, I'm sorry, did you go ahead?
No, Jeff, you go first, because I'm going to actually circle back to the beginning of this conversation.
And what gets, I think where we have to, look at that RFP is that we are discussing a design process. And so this is piece of where we're saying in the city's design process that is initiated with this RFP, we recommend the following be considered versus saying, we've had a design process. Here's what you should do. Because there will be a public involvement component to that, the RFP. That's all part of that process. So it's sort of calibrating to what extent you want to say, do something on behalf of, or do you also want to say, and we want you to do the following. So just wanted to add that. Sorry, Dee Dee.
No, that's fine. And I think all of this conversation goes back to bringing Dr. Wilson into our conversation, and again, just the piece that I didn't want to get lost is that while we're not ready to do all of this public engagement and et cetera, half of which is due to COVID, what we talked about is really just having a very short online conversation with her to get the big picture. How did they do this? So that as we proceed, we know what the pieces are, not that we're going to do them right away. So I just didn't want to, again, lose that. And I hate to wait until we're ready for some big work session and do that. And I just wanted to comment on the memory project. I totally agree with Rachel that what's really exciting is publicly available research, but that doesn't always happen. And I heard the word ownership, and that gave me pangs because it's being used to CVHR, who just shares everything, even while it's happening. I would hope that that will continue. That will be the thank you.
Absolutely. To be available. The question was, and this, kind of gets to issues of ethics in public history and data sovereignty, as it's called, has to do with, descendants being concerned about how there's a lot of research being done, on folks that kind of ends up siloed at UVA. And so, there's the emphasis is on availability, accessibility, right? And also that how the data is being used, that this is something that descendants have a word in, in saying, how it gets used, because that's been the problem, for a long time with anything that UVA is involved with, doing research in the community. And this is one thing that the Equity Center, which is also under the Democracy Initiative, this umbrella here, that the Equity Center has been concerning itself with, which is developing protocols for UVA folks doing research in the community. What does it look like to follow, it's, human subjects research, and even though these folks are long dead, of course, but, and so it's about being sensitive to that. The owner, that might be a strong word, but to have the folks that are the subject of the research or the descendants of the subject of the research, have some sort of say in how the information is being stored, accessed, and used, I guess. So if that kind of explains some of the issues.
It certainly does with like oral histories and, and really those kinds of non-public information. But when we're talking about public research, I Thank you. I mean, I totally get what you're talking about, but I do think there's different arenas. And again, that's what CVHR's incredible value has been over the years, is that all of these different people are just mining the publicly available data and make it available to anybody who can use it. And
Right, right. Yeah, and it'll take, I mean, in terms of accessibility, it'll take, kind of developing the right kind of database, that is, kind of accessible, not, I mean, whatever the sophisticated equivalent of an Excel spreadsheet would be, I don't know, what, but a way that, searchable, or, this sort of thing, a public history, a digital history project, as it were, you know what I mean? So, yeah, and then, of course, to be available, and as you said, even in process, it's just going on. And so that's part of the idea of having regular reports back to the community of these student researchers, like what we found so far. And, because this can also shake things loose. It's like, oh yeah, that plantation, I've heard this in my family, you know what I mean? And it can kind of send you down paths and stuff, which is what Shelley Murphy is finding, in her work there at the university, as they hear more kind of verbal reports, from descendants, they kind of get sent down more paths, that are productive, to mine and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's important in progress to agree.
So I guess my thought too is that the privacy and ownership issues definitely need to be managed, since we are talking about living descendants, and in some cases may have information about their ancestors that they may not want, they may not want out in the public.
Right.
I know there was a big issue at Harvard a year or two ago where there was a photograph of an enslaved person that was
Right.
used for some, I don't know, promotional material or exhibit
Yes.
or something. And
That's right.
that person had a living descendant who was very upset that their ancestors' image was plastered out there in the public for
Well, and the making of
consumption.
profit from it,
Exactly.
and then Harvard's, controlling the access to it. I mean, it's just
Right.
mind-boggling, and they won a court
Right.
case about it. Harvard did.
Yep.
It's just,
Yep. So I think we need to think through, or just, I think UVA and other researchers and whoever's involved in the project need to think through some of those ownership issues, just to make sure that the descendants are valued and their privacy issues are incorporated as part of the
right.
public sharing of information.
Yeah, and none of this has been worked out yet, but I just wanted to signal that I want to be deferential to, even as, I'm an entity at UVA as the memory project. And then of course there's the, Descendants Office, with Shelley Murphy, also an entity at UVA, I mean, and then working in tandem with, Jefferson School and Descendants and stuff. But I kind of want to reverse the usual hierarchy, when it comes to UVA and the community, and be deferential to, really be listening to, the wishes of Descendants and the Jefferson School, our community partner.
Oh, go ahead, Phil, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. I was gonna say that Kay was.
Yes, I just wanted to get back to Jeff's question to say that perhaps what we should advise him to do is just to let Parks and Rec and the city manager know that when they bring this up again, that we are working in this process and we want to be involved. That way we don't have to get into it all now with Parks and Rec, because things will evolve by the time they get around to it, but just letting them know so that, as often happens with the city, the right hand does one thing and the left hand does another. So that would be a way to avert that. I thank Jeff for, alerting us to this in advance.
Rachel, did you have something to add?
It was pretty similar to what Kay just said, that, that coordination between the this effort and the master planning for the parks and with Parks and Rec needs to be coordinated. I don't want us to make assumptions that are not accurate.
Right. So I guess, Jeff, if you can do that however you can, and then maybe it would be good for us over the next few months to develop some specific and I won't say concerns, but specific points about each of the park locations and what we would hope to see included in any plan for those. I had two other things to add to this item. One is that on my own personal research, I've been going through newspapers, some of the same ones that Gail Schulman used, and starting to pull out advertisements related to enslavement in Court Square and in Albemarle in general. So that's another another bit that can be pulled from when I finish that. And then also a history teacher at Charlottesville High School contacted me about wanting
And this is a history teacher at CHS. My kid had him as a teacher. And yeah, so it'd be great. I mean, I mean, if they, kids can be, students can be kind of, supervised and, kind of doing this research and stuff and having it, with the project that Andrea has had going on at the Jefferson School, the Trailblazers project. They are training high school students to be researchers and to lead walking tours and this sort of thing. They're kind of, making junior historians out of them, which is great, and so that's the other thing too, is about democratizing the skills, the research skills, so that it's not just a bunch of eggheads, at the university that, that have these, that are kind of, sitting overall. I mean, that's again, the data sovereignty and democratizing of the process, not only availability of data, but the process itself too, so I think that's important, that the ethics of how we go about it is important as the, kind of final report or whatever that gets, or eventually monument that gets produced,
Okay, so if I wanted to just summarize how we're moving this forward right now. So we're working on additional historical research through through the Memory Project and other individuals working on moving that forward. And then I would say also an important part of this, which comes from the Engaging Descendants Community document, is that we're building relationships with descendants and continuing to do that to move this forward. Were there any other comments on that specifically? If not, we can move forward to maybe discussing the project goal. Jeff had some text about that.
I just wanted to say one thing that I did find, and I dropped the ball after the 27th of July. I was just kind of scrambling through my email inbox here, and I did say that Robert and Jeff helpfully drafted an email to Dr. Wilson. And so, yeah, and I will follow up on that. So sorry that I dropped that. And thank you, Robert and Jeff, for doing that. Yeah.
Thanks, Julie.
I just say that I hope our reach out to her would emphasize that we are looking for advice, not just on how to engage the descendant community, but how we might engage them in a process that would ultimately lead to some sort of a design related to memorializing the activities and events associated with enslavement and its relationship to Court Square. I think this has all kind of gotten bigger going to the park design, but just to embark us as a committee on how we would start to engage in those processes, starting with this one, which was the issue at hand and has been for, over a year or so, well, more than that now, because of the marker issue at Court Square.
And so that's, I think, why I wanted to get at a goal. There's, this had started when the plaque was stolen. And I think we all gave it an honest effort to do something that should be there. And, it was a learning curve for all of us that, to take a step back. So we initiated this as, all right, what could be done? What do people think? How do we identify those individuals and even have that conversation? And it's, when we hear, I see, for design process, where memorials and monuments, those step into things where, and I know I've said it before, where people have an expectation that we're going to deliver something. So I want to have like an agreed goal that when we talk to people, and some of you've seen I know the media follows these meetings, and they say things like the Historic Resources Committee is involved in a design process. We're not. And so I just want to make that clear. And then, and I think, Robert, I don't know if you have my note, the note we worked on with Professor Wilson and about what the goal was of the outreach, integrating that in the recommendations to City Council. And maybe that would help us when people say, what are you doing? Say, this is, we're not building a monument. We're not funding anything. We don't know if that's going to occur, but we want to make from that input a recommendation to council. And I think that's where, Professor Dr. Wilson could, help craft language that we would use as a recommendation for the RFP. I don't know, maybe already in there, but it would certainly be, how that process was done at UVA and elsewhere could instruct how that RFP is written. So I said, I'm going back to where the goal, I would say, is a recommendation to council based on input from for the descendant community. And that recommendation can be either to incorporate this into the park planning, as the downtown parks, or it could be a recommendation that something be pursued separately and as follows. So that's what I'm hoping you all can agree on or find or express.
So I think if we want to discuss a specific goal, we should probably defer this to the next meeting based on the agenda time right now. But I think for now, let's look at this language, see if it aligns with what we hope it to be. I personally think one thing that we may want to incorporate is this historical research component, that is actually a important component of any recommendation, and that it's something that will take time as the memory project folks work through that research. So I guess I would encourage everyone to think about this, and we can discuss this further at the next meeting. Sound good? Okay. Are there any other comments on the engagement? Okay. Let's move on to the downtown walking tour map. Dee Dee, do you want to take this one?
I'm going to defer to Kay. Either of us could do it, but Kay's really taken the lead, and I've appreciated it.
Great.
Well, I think you've gotten the memo, and just to summarize, we had, Dee Dee and I had met after our last meeting with designer Ann Chestnut to talk about ideas for walking map and to seek design and print estimates. And we'd been reviewing the previous map and all of that. I think you all have gotten copies of the Jefferson Schools Star Hill Union Ridge tour map, which was designed by Ann, and there was also a UVA map using a similar design. And so we would see our city walking map being in a similar style. And we talked about the three areas, in our memo, about the three areas we've identified, to use as this map. but a lot of what would happen is starting with the design and then trying to fashion all the words we're going to put in after we really get the map drawn up and in the 3 areas. So I don't know how much detail you want to go. I mean, we say that in the memo. Again, the 3 areas I'll just say are the Court Square area, the downtown business and commercial, and then sort of an area that I guess we're calling segregation and civil rights eras of the 50s, 60s, using the old library, the new library, and the former post office and courthouse, the McGuffey School, part of the
Uh-oh,
which is
Hey, you've frozen a little bit.
froze.
If you could,
Oh, are you back, Kay?
well, I don't know that I just have
You got most of it.
unstable. I have an unstable. Sorry about that. I can't do anything about it. So yeah, just tell me if I freeze because
sure, the last thing I heard was you said the 3 locations that you were focusing on.
okay, so those 3 locations, and then for design purposes, Ann's estimate was for the designer part would be between 2,900 and 4,900, depending on the time allocation, plus some cost for any use of photos. And then the size paper we're using is standard. She got bids from 2 printers to estimate the printing cost. And that came to, there was sort of a big difference between the 2 that we looked at. And of course, we look at them again because these bids are only good for 30 days. But the for 10,000 copies, it was like 12, what was it? It was like about $3,000, a little over $3,000. So the total cost we think would be somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000. And again, these are estimates, but we feel very clear that this is the designer, that she's got a proven record, and that, her maps are very clear and good and interesting, visually interesting. And we think this would be the way to go forward if we're going to go forward on a downtown.
And I'll just add to that. There's a couple thoughts. One is that these are now sort of the new standard for these walking and driving tours. I know Jeff particularly really wanted to stay in that 17 by 11. This is basically doubles the space of that format, allowing a lot more images, a lot more white space, even within with the same amount of information. There also is the issue of those being publicly available in places that this will then kind of match in a sense. This is sort of the kind of puts them in the same arena. My real takeaway, and this wasn't new, I learned this long ago at Ivy Creek, is you need a designer. I mean, it was sort of the first point I thought that, oh my God, this could actually get done and it will look good. And, these are professionals. And it kind of is not unlike the discussion about the RFP in the parks. We don't design things. We can't do that. You get the professionals to, and, you provide the research and the information. And it does, the other advantage, and if you look at the PDFs of particularly the Heritage Center tour, the one produced by the Heritage Center, which is Star Hill and Hydraulic, it enables side trips. Like we talked about putting inserts into the old format. This actually enables you to potentially incorporate just little side things to Jefferson Street or Water Street, or those are the kinds of the things that we talked about. And then finally, Kay, talked about the design costs and the printing costs. I assume we won't bear all of the printing costs because these are used by the visitor center, which has an enormous budget. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars budget, as well as, you know, other entities that freely give these out like candy. So I would not think that those costs would be borne by us. And obviously there's a huge benefit to getting lots and lots printed at a time. I mean, the cost per piece go way, way down. And that's the other thing we've seen in the past is that you go through them real fast. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I have if we don't go with a designer at all, this is just going to take an enormously long time and we will have an inferior product. So I can't stress enough. And I think those prices are actually incredible. If you think about what it's going to cost, and I know it's not comparable to, you know, design a memorial here versus, you know, this walking map, which is used by a lot of people. You know, a few $1,000s is nothing. And I was involved with that Heritage Center map, and where the difference between 3,000 and 5,000 comes in is when the committee starts wordsmithing and going back to the designer and saying, change this and change that. So if we were really committed to doing all of that fussing within our own group and not going back and back and back to the poor designer, we can totally keep it way, way closer to 3,000.
So do you think one review period would be sufficient rather than a detailed micromanaging wordsmithing?
It was certainly that. I don't know if one is the number.
Right, sure. It's something
yeah,
small
I
and
mean,
contained.
but definitely not. Again, knowing what happened with the Star Hill one, it was just kind of unnecessary. But you know, it was just a process, and I think we've learned a lot from that.
I've worked with her on other things, and she's really good at sort of getting the design, and then as a writer and as people that are then thinking about the content, you sort of can fit it in, you know, and you really write to that kind of design. I don't know how to explain it any other way, but it's really helpful rather than starting with this blank slate and you think, you know, the design is going to come at the end. And so it's very helpful, and she's good at, you know, sort of laying it out, and then you have the parameters, and you know, she's done this a lot, so she's experienced.
And I'd just like to add one more thing, because we talked about this when we met with her, and I mean, she just kept having these really, really good ideas.
I know.
That were like, oh my God, that's just such a simple idea. Because we talked about the themes that we had discussed in the committee about African-American history. I mean, you could have a separate tour on this, and she said, well, you can use icons too, and just like tags for the sites that intersect on the three areas that relate to your interest groups, whether it's African-American history, women's history, religious history, you know, whatever, if that particular site relates to that theme, so that somebody could target a tour. That's just a very simple idea, but it was just, she said several like that. It was just like, oh yeah, that's such a good idea. And that's why you use a designer.
So I guess
it's looking really pretty.
Great. So Jeff, I have a more procedural question about this. What would we do to basically allocate money to this? Like, because it's not actually paying for something, it's more agreeing to pay for a time and materials contract going forward.
Yeah, it's below that 10,000 threshold. So we can really just agree to the expense and have a PO, and just if it helps, according to the old invoices, we went through 10,000 copies approximately between early 2014 and I guess 2019 we started to run out. So 2,000 a year seem to have been distributed, if that helps.
So, and I think that leads me into my next comment, is that I think if Well, I guess we have two aspects to this. One is that I think we should get a small print run done first, just because it's brand new and we're more likely to find errors or want to make changes to it after this first one. And so getting 10,000 copies and then realizing that like we made a hit. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess a historical error would be most important, but also just like, typos and things like that.
Correct.
So getting a small print run so that we don't have 5 years worth of them.
Mhm.
And then also, I guess we would also need to figure out some way to either get them printed and then have other entities pay for them, or give those entities the master files so that they could get them printed themselves. But Jeff, do you have any ideas of how that would work if we paid for those and then had other entities like the Visitors Bureau reimburse us, or how would that work?
Well, I think first off, it's printing's relatively inexpensive. I'm not, I mean, and that your idea even of doing incremental printings is easy. Just have to make sure we keep track of the whatever that special file is that allows someone to print it. So you're doing it incrementally isn't expensive, and even it's that initial design that I think making a commitment to that cost. I know that the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Robert and I had spoken with them, I don't know, maybe a year ago about collaborating on something. I mean, we could certainly reach out to them. I don't, I think maybe it's not, my personal experience has always been when you invite people to participate, you then have to introduce further discussion. So I don't know, I would weigh that against, getting something and getting it out there.
So that's a good point too, that like we could easily just pay for 10,000 or pay for 1,500 or 1,000, get them printed, give them away, and then figure out in the next round like who would pay for them and how that would be exchanged. But the immediate thing is authorizing the expenditure for the designer, because that'll be a few months process, I assume, to
Right, and that's
design,
what
get
I
them
would recommend as well. And she talked about small runs versus large runs. You do a different process if you only want a small amount. And she talked about laser printing versus, and she knows about not only those things, but printers. I mean, she didn't get things necessarily printed in Charlottesville. Just Harrisonburg's a much better place to do it. But it's a better equipment for bigger companies. But
she has a number of different printers, and for the small run, it might be slightly different. So I think it's really, she'll get the bids from all of them,
Well, and I think if we're interested in a small run just for a check copy, there are other ways to do that. That she would advise us on, and then we could do the checking and all the, confirmation, and then they could just print the right number. That's cost effective.
She'll give us lots of proofs on that ahead of time. So we'll be able to do that before they ever print. We'll be able to do that kind of as much checking as we want to in advance of anything being printed.
So the beauty of my feeling on this would be that you all could, and I think Dee and Kay, if you guys have the numbers, you could, you don't have to refer to something specific, but to allocate an amount, and that I can get a purchase order going, and whatever hoops and hurdles we have to go through for that, and get that design and get that initial map done. And from that, we then have something to kind of market to these other organizations, saying, well, you know what, we have a design, we have a designer, we can alter this, and here's what that would cost. And so we could take this first step, use that success then to follow up with other types of maps, because it really is, this is the big hurdle to get over, I think, is, and if you all want agree on spending that money, you can, approve a motion to allow me to pursue a purchase order for that, we can make it happen.
Jenny, did you have a
I
question?
would like to move that, and then we can discuss this, of course, but I'd like to move that we allocate up to $8,000 for the design and the printing, knowing that we're going to try to get a smaller run print to begin with, but then we don't have to reallocate later if, we later decide, okay, now let's move ahead with so many more, whatever. But in agreement that we would then show the design to other groups.
I think it would be a better idea to separate the design and the printing.
Okay. Well,
Well, how about as a compromise that we think more like $5,000 that would totally cover, it would cover the design and probably in a short run.
Mhm.
fine.
And it does open up the possibility we'll come back and say, hey, guys, I really don't think we'll be at the upper, and she didn't either think we would be at the upper end of that design cost. She just has to cover, she's
Yeah.
a professional. That's a
She's
professional.
worked with committees.
Yeah, and I think
Is there any digital format of this walking tour in terms of, is it just a paper-based map that you all are focused on?
Did you see there's a PDF which was included in the materials. That's
Yeah.
probably not what you're talking about. That
No.
could be too, and we could talk to her about having the files be able to be.
Yeah, I wondered if at UVA they've started doing QR codes for certain spots where you do, you do a QR code and it gives you a map, but they're, I guess the idea would be like, would there be certain spots downtown or, on the tour where you could have a QR code where somebody could pull up their phone and read about a certain spot and the history? I'm just wondering how many folks are going to pick up a paper map and use it in our city walking around. I mean, obviously people that are visiting, they're interested, but if to make it more accessible and interesting, is there an
I think that's a
option
good.
for-
Well,
I think that's a good item for future work. I actually want to back up because I actually did an inappropriate procedural thing, which was I believe Kay actually made a motion. So
And
if you
then
could actually
DD
back up to that.
perhaps was making a substitute motion. I don't care. I
Yeah.
just thought, let's do
So I
it.
believe the motion, the motion on the table is allocating $8,000 to the design and printing of the brochure. Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Rachel seconds. Please indicate. Sorry. I'm sorry. I forgot you had your hand up.
I'd like to point out, I've been trying to behave very well today, and I've not been blurting out, and I've been very patient, and I've been trying to see how long it would take to get my question answered. So I'm blurting in now because we should have discussion once a call for discussion once a motion is made and seconded. But I have the same concerns that Jessica has, and I really feel it's important that we have this in a digital format as well. So my question is, as well as designing for print media, will this be designed for digital media so that it could be on our website?
That's not part of what we talked to her about, so we can't speak to that now.
Well, I don't want to vote to spend a lot of money on something to be printed when it would be more accessible if we could at least, as part of, amend this motion to say we would explore ways to have it digitally available. I mean, I live downtown and I see people with paper.
I think that would be fine to.
Yeah, I just think that we're missing a real opportunity if we don't do it digitally at the same time.
Jenny,
And
would you
there
like to
might
make a
be something
motion
that
to?
makes us can the paper at some point, and we can always change the digital easier.
Would you like to make a motion to amend the motion on the table?
If that's acceptable.
Well, it's just, I could say as the motion.
Oh,
maker,
yes,
I would
sorry. I
accept
forgot that you were allowed to
Yeah.
do that. Yes, so.
that I would accept Jenny's recommendation that we also proceed to see about getting a digital version. And I don't know that can, but yes, I would.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
And I'd just like to say, as somebody who makes digital audio tours, that it's you can't necessarily take the same file and make it, but you can definitely take all the same information in photos. I mean, that's the hard work. And you obviously need a platform, which, you know, I know what one I use, and I'm not sure which one UVA uses, but yeah, it's easy to do that. Whether the designer would do that or not is a question we can ask her.
We can
But,
ask. her.
you know, I'm all about that. So, yeah.
And if she can't, I'm sure it could be worked into the contract that she would give permission that her material could be modified by someone so that it could be on the city's website and available, you know, so it could be linked. Because I think if we do that, we'll have people using it to plan their trips and their visits to Charlottesville. Schools will use it. It'll just be much wider distributed. So thank you for entertaining.
So just to be clear, so what I envisioned doing was having you all have some sort of an agreement, a document from, and I'm sorry, I remember the designer that you're working with, that then I could process. So I just want to make sure then that if something needs to be modified to that document, and I think you all were circulating, can that be made, you know, such that you all agree with what that says, or do you want to pull it up now? I don't want that when I issue a PO, it's going to be for, this is what you offer to do. We agree to pay for it, go do it. So it's got to be really clear. I don't want to be in the position of having to interpret or negotiate with.
Yeah,
them
well, we
necessarily.
need to talk to her about what
Yeah,
she
yeah.
could do of the digital part. We have the other information that we can give you, but we would need to talk to her about the digital.
Well, although I think we could, and Jeff, tell me if this is adequate, that in your PO, we are doing 4,000 for printing and 4,000 for design and 4,000 for printing. And there might be some morphing of those two, 3,000, 5,000, you know, whatever. Is that acceptable? Because it's a
Sure. I
total.
mean, you know, you're allowing us as staff to use the strict resources funds. I think it's that, but when I sign, you know, I don't have to go to an RFP because of the amount, or at least that's my understanding. So it would be going to the individual y'all been working with and saying, hey, everybody like this, let's run with it. So I don't know, I guess it's more, do you want to get that language right and get it to me, or?
Yes,
I mean,
we will get that right and get it.
yeah, I mean, I think the formality is more that we're going to spend money and you all know it. So whether it's, you know, $4,817.37 or whatever, you know, it's that you all are consenting to the expense. But if the scope of work, I don't, you know, can we resolve it with emails? And you all take a look at that. It's
Yeah, we can.
and
we
let
can
me
show
know.
you- Yeah.
You know, you all
So we
circulate,
didn't
let me
share
know.
with
Yeah, this,
you probably exactly what we may have, I don't know,
Okay.
what she wrote to
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
that's fine.
We
And
have
then-
we have a more detailed thing from her already that we can share with you, Jeff. And then if you need more, we can go back to
Cool.
her.
I think, you know, you all moved, you know, to allocate, you know, allow staff to, you know, pursue a purchase order, you know, per whatever the correspondence you've had, and that, you know, it will incorporate reference to this being available for online use. I'm sorry, how you want to phrase it.
The digital, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're not writing a contract for me, and it really is just
Yeah.
something to generally say that, and then we all are in agreement, and then we can work with you guys, and I'll take care of it. And then I think printing is, I think, you know, she had some amounts in there for some limited printing, and I think, you know, however you want to characterize that. But what I'm hearing is that we're not pursuing anything like a large scale printing. Okay, so I would suggest, however you want to amend that with the, you know, allowing staff to pursue a purchase order for this agreement, you know, with this provision and, you know, X amount, and then X amount to be used for an initial printing, you know, or not more than $2,500 or whatever, however you want to phrase it. That's fine.
Okay.
Just keeps Robert and I from, you know, going to the beach with your money. That's all.
And I forgot to say, I realized I made a mistake when I was talking. Those high prices were 12,500 copies. The 10,000 was a little bit less, you know, like $500 less expensive. And we did have 7,500, 10,000 and 12,500, but we can decide on those later because we're not printing them yet. We're
Right, and to clarify that we are discussing with her about a digital adaptation, but we're not commissioning her to do it with that
Right.
$8,000.
And Phil, I think I forget who was the seconder to my motion, but they would have to agree to the amendment as well.
Yes, I was a seconder and I agree.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to authorize the expenditure of up to $8,000 for the design and printing of the walking tour map. Let's vote now.
With exploration of the
With
digital.
exploration of a digital format. All those in favor indicate
Aye.
or say aye. That's unanimous. Okay.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion for a 5-minute recess since we're at the top of the hour. Yeah, okay. Do I need to make a motion for a recess, Kay?
You say,
Okay,
hey,
let's have a recess.
be back in 5.
Let's be back in 5.
We'll reconvene at 12:15, 12:16.
Hey, Dee Dee, can I ask you a question? Are you still there?
Sure.
Oh, she's
Sure.
so, and I don't know who else. So I've already asked Kay. A woman contacted me some time ago, Susan Whetstone. Her husband was an artist, Robert Reed. I think he was she said he was an artist or professor. I don't know here. I think at Yale. Either way.
She's a professor at Yale. I've been in contact with her, Jeff.
Okay, good.
So
And
she's actually getting all those documents. It's really interesting though. I'll just say for anybody who's still listening, Robert Reed was a wonderful artist. He was from Charlottesville, African American. He's a cousin of Drury Brown. And he died maybe 5 years ago. There was one of his paintings was in the recent exhibit at the Jefferson Center of local.
what happened with and so she was asking, there was a design project. And that's where I've been hitting dead ends. So did anything happen with that? I mean,
Nothing happened with he made a proposal for a % for art project and it was approved. And he was going to do it, you know. And she does have the document. She does have information. She was looking to see what the city had about it.
Right.
But she has something and she's sending it to me. So I will share it with you, Jeff, as soon as I get it, because I was really interested. I'm kind of curious whether it was, she also has photos from the opening of the bridge when it was dedicated to Drury Brown, because he was there, Robert was there and he took pictures at the time.
Yeah, so she wanted to, she wants to donate his work to the Smithsonian, and an element was was to say that he had done this work, and I felt bad saying, I don't think we ever did it. You know, I don't think.
I think she's convinced we didn't do it, but at least we have the design, and it'll be interesting to see because maybe it's still relevant. You know, I mean, maybe that's something. It would be really interesting to see what
I'm reading.
Do. So I'll share it with you. She's put it in the mail to me, and I've also sent her a Bridge Builders booklet because she hadn't seen that and she was really interested.
What was
I had this letter from Warren Betchenstein and talking about the decorative panels and using bricks, Morse code panels, some fascinating stuff. And I think what she, and I wanted to know was, did the city ever award, was this an award, whether implemented or not, was it awarded to him? And I can't find anybody that knows.
I don't think it was, but did you understand that it was for the bridge in particular?
I understood it for the bridge, but then she sent me some letters, refers to the Water Street parking garage. And then I have a letter from Huja. I tried to reach out to Huja, had not heard back. I just wanted to be able to tell the lady, I don't know. I know we didn't do it, but I don't know if he was ever awarded that.
Yeah. Well, Huja would know, so maybe eventually you'll hear from him. But once she sends it, maybe we can find out some more.
Okay.
Maybe we can, then that'll be something to whet people's memories.
And I know Kate was
Someone by the
on
name of
that, so I just thought
Whetstone,
maybe
yeah.
Dee Dee knows. I don't know. I was going to ask Jenny. I don't know if she's still on. It's just like, I mean.
Yeah, I don't
do-
know. Yeah. But thank you,
And-
Kay. That's,
But I'll also ask Virginia Doherty, because I left council right around that time and Virginia became the mayor. And so it might have been in that period of time right after the bridge was dedicated. That would make sense to do it in the 98 to 2000 period if they were going to do percent for art.
Yeah, she's in the July 17, 1995. Motion by Ms. Doherty, council approved transferring $5,000 from the Water Street parking garage percent for art in the CIP to the West Main Street Bridge project.
Ah,
So there's money moving.
job.
We have the letters, but
okay.
yeah,
wow.
Another
Did he get-
clue.
yeah. So I mean, again, but it's just,
Okay, if everyone's back,
yeah.
let's,
I'm just
there's
going to
so
remind
much-
you, I'm going to slip away at 12:30.
I'm sorry, Dee Dee. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mystery solved though. Or
No,
partially.
great. Thank you. Good job, both of you. Wow.
Yeah, I too am gonna have to leave by 12:30, so you may not see me come back.
let's just get everything done in the next 14 minutes then.
Yeah.
Phil, I know that there were some on the agenda were the rules of procedure. Do you want to move
Oh
that up
yeah,
while we have quorum?
yes. Let's what do I do? I'm gonna make a motion to move the amend rules of procedure item in the agenda to right now before the Vinegar Hill Park signage item. And I need a second for that. Rachel
I'll
seconds.
second.
Please indicate your support for this with a hand or visual indication. That's enough. So let's move on to the amended rules of procedure. So I don't know if anybody else had never read the bylaws, but we apparently have them, and we had been violating them in numerous ways, including having two vice co-chairs. So mostly this is to bring the bylaws into compliance with how we actually operate. There's a couple of points here. Sorry, I'm going to bring this up in the. Sorry, I need to look at this, and I didn't have it up in front of me. So the first one clarifies a membership issue that we've had, which is that it was unclear how many. Oh, thanks, Robert. I'm on page 44. It clarifies a membership issue where it wasn't clear whether the city council member was a voting member or not, and whether they were included in the number of members of the committee. So this clarifies that to say that that there are 12 regular members of the committee that are all appointed by city council. And then additionally, it names 2 specific ex officio members. And I didn't know what an ex officio member was until I read this. And so it's basically somebody who is a member of the committee because of the position they hold in city government or some other organization rather than that individual person. And so what this says is specifically that the historic preservation and design planner, who's Jeff, is a member of the committee. And then additionally, the city council member is a member of the committee. And that city council member is, I guess, agreed upon by city council. And then we can additionally name other ex officio members if we want to. And so an example of this would be Robert, who I don't remember what his position at the city is offhand, but we could name him as a ex officio member of the committee so that he can operate within the committee. And then additionally, we previously had the ability to say that name an unlimited number of voting ex officio members, which seemed a little bit in contradiction with the fact that city council names the voting members of the committee. And so I wrote this up as limiting that to a maximum of 2. I don't know why we would ourselves even have the ability to name other voting members of this committee, but I didn't want to go too far out of what the original bylaws said. So I'm open to changing that also. So then the second part was public comment. It was unclear whether we actually adopted this because this is prior to me being on the committee. But I think it was noticed at the February meeting and then the March meeting never happened because of COVID. Or it was just super unclear whether this ever actually happened. So we're just going to renotice it and amend the bylaws to include public comment. And then finally, there was one other item which is not in the packet, but the agenda that we have in our bylaws is significantly different from the agenda that we actually follow. And so we should just update that to be the agenda that we actually follow now. I think the only significant change to that is that we should move the approval of the agenda to before public comment, since we're not supposed to actually start doing items in the agenda prior to approving the agenda. But that's a pretty perfunctory change in that. That was a lot.
So
Comments?
question,
Yes.
why do the ex officio vote? It just seems like that.
Yeah.
Seems like
I agree. I don't know why it was.
Non-voting ex officio members, you may decide for any given period of time, if you're working on some concentrated project or something, that you want somebody to be there regularly, but I would just suggest that they all be non-voting ex officio.
I agree, and it would affect our ability to have a quorum if they were voting.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
the same even with the city council member too. I used to serve on lots of committees, but usually it was ex officio when it was, like an advisory committee like this.
Yeah.
It maybe for clarity's sake, we should add a line that ex officios do not affect the ability to achieve quorum.
Yeah.
However you want to word that, or wherever you want to put it, but I think.
Yeah, there's another section about quorum is specifically, there's another part in the bylaws that say quorum is specifically the voting members.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
that's
So-
good.
So it looks like it says the secretary treasurer is the technically the Charlottesville Historic Preservation Planner. So I guess
Right.
that's Jeff, right? So he's officially in that role.
Except or their designated
Yeah.
person,
Which could be Robert.
right? Which in our case is Robert.
Yeah,
And so that's
okay.
that's sort of why I wrote this in there, because we would want to make Robert an ex officio member so that he could serve as secretary treasurer. Are there any other concerns about this? We don't have anything to do today because this is just the notice of these, and we'll have, we can amend this text to remove the 2 voting ex officio members. And then at the next meeting, we'll actually have a motion to amend the bylaws and vote on it. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank
that's that
you.
item. Okay, Vinegar Hill Park signage. Jeff, did you have anything to start off with?
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
off?
busy reading all of Kay's comments and old city council minutes here. And Maurice Cox, it's really an interesting trip here. So what we've got at the Vinegar Hill Park is it's everything I found. This was initiated by the Historic Resources Committee, so this is sort of yours to complete or however. I mean, the park has been established as this boundary, and these are just simply using some images and from Laura Knott's 2016 plan. This is the area of the mall that was established as Vinegar Hill Park, and of course, there was the recommendation by the committee to install some signage. Robert, flip down one. So there's the entrance sign there in downtown mall would be switched to the city's wayfinding sign design. And so we know what those are. We have the design for them. There was an interpretive marker sign, that's number B there. It was just a one-sided thing that the HRC was going to present or provide the content for. And then there were these metal banners that would be installed on the light poles to establish the boundaries of the park. And as most of you know, back in 2016, a $15,000 budget was sort of floated in the staff report to council, but there was no commitment of any dollars. I can't find anywhere an actual quote or estimate. And the irony is, and Dee Dee, you're being, and both Kay being former city officials, I can't get an estimate unless I have a funding source. So it's sort of there's a catch-22 here that I'm not sure what to do with it. But I thought the first and foremost would be to say, do you all want to pursue something, and what? And the signage is, I know the best I have are some rough numbers from similar signage, and we could be looking at $20,000, $30,000 worth of signage. I don't know, but I figured before I went round Robin's barn to try to get some numbers nailed down, would probably determine what would you all like to do, and the idea being that I can then treat this as something real.
I'm sorry, you cut out for a second there.
Sorry, just saying, so that I can then pursue kind of what is it that you all would like to have estimated, and whether or not we need additional funding for council, we can get to that. But just to at least, if I'm going to pursue some cost, to know what it is that we would like to explore. And so I know that, well, I think it's important that and even if it's to simply replace that metal plate with one that said Vinegar Hill Park, I think something to at least state what that is. But again, how would you all like to move forward? We could also, and the reason, Robert, if you go down to took those photos, there are, so on the side of City Hall is actually one of these that you all are talking about. But down there, the next one down, just looking back from Old Preston Ave up, we could put banners on the poles.
Yes.
That might be a little simpler, and I mean, it would use the same design. It just would be fabric on poles. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, and how would you all like to proceed, and with what?
Hey, looks like you have something.
Yeah, I was thinking that the first two looked pretty, although they're so little, I can't see them, but look pretty standard. And I think the second one has a map of what Vinegar Hill was. Is that correct?
So that's the interpretive marker, and that we don't have any content for that. We have an outline that has been tossed around, I think, for a couple of years, but nothing has been determined on that.
Well,
So
anyway, I'll just finish then. I was thinking it would be really nice to have a map of where Vinegar Hill was. And then I actually, when you showed those ones with the metal on the light poles, I was thinking banners, but I was thinking get some banners from some of the pictures of Vinegar Hill and use those. I just think it would be a much more alive kind of history to see some. And we've got a number of photos that we'd have to get permission, of course, but that have been used in different books and things. And I think it's at least worth exploring.
Yeah, and I think I would follow on from that and say that I feel like the historical aspect of this signage plan is pretty paltry. That there's only one location that there's going to be any historical information about Vinegar Hill in, and that I would really think that we would want to have more than just one small place at a location where very few people actually go. It's at the west end where there just isn't a lot of traffic that goes through there, versus the east end, which is, you know, at the end of the what most people walk up and down on the mall and would be much more accessible. And so I think that if we were to allocate money for these signs, I feel like we wouldn't be getting much for that, because they're simply markers saying that it's a park, and that seems like something that either Parks and Rec should pay for just basically, or the city council should allocate specific money for in the capital improvement.
I agree with you. And may I interject at this point with deeper history on this, which is that originally it was an initiative that came out from one or two members of the committee, because it was mentioned in the Halpern plan that there would be a Vinegar Hill Park. And so it sort of originated as a place claiming, naming exercise, but it was part of something bigger when we were working with Scott French, who was going to make his information available, and he was going to write the copy for at least 4 markers that would be doing what Kay is talking about, sort of marking the extent or the edges of Vinegar Hill. Because that work never came through, we were never able to follow through on that. So you're right. It is negligent on the history, because that component was never done.
Robert, I just sent something your way. If you can throw that up on the screen, I just emailed it to you. That's the text from that 2016 staff report that outlines what the committee had taken to council, and I get that's, to me, probably the best course would be to and I know we looked at this, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, but to essentially go back to council to reevaluate this and to request something dedicated towards it. The thing is, there is when Parks and Recs, it is their place, and they have a park planning process. So that's why I don't know, and Jenny, you probably can have the memory on that, is that, was this intended to bring something forward that would be done and not given to Parks and Rec to kind of see what they wanted to do? I mean, to go and say, well, here we have a plan. And I noticed in the staff report, there is this reference to working with people in the community, et cetera, et cetera. So you all could recommend that council revisit this completely. And make some recommendations and suggestions on how best to do it. I leave that to you. But I think in the absence of that, there is an expectation that the committee is going to be doing something there.
Well, let me also add that, and maybe it was 2 years ago, that the subcommittee held a meeting and Kathy Johnson Harris came sort of as a representative of people who had lived on Vinegar Hill and whose histories intersected with Vinegar Hill. And so there was actually an initiation or talk about an engagement process for this. So maybe I'm just speaking for myself, maybe with everything that's going on now and the fact that there's going to be a mall study and so forth and so on, maybe it should just kind of wait. That's just me saying that. Because the idea of calling it Vinegar Hill Park does give an expectation that when you get there, there will be something that is park-like. And all that we have at this point are signs.
You mean because more trees and stuff need to be planted and?
Oh, well, I'm not going there.
No, I'm just asking because I don't know.
Because nobody knows.
Somebody else can answer the question, but
Nobody knows because it was never a Vinegar Hill Park design. It was really just kind of a reclaiming it sort of as an homage to Vinegar Hill because of the past neglect of having that tiny little sign, and it was going to be part of a process. That process was never completed. It was interrupted. We're probably in another place now. The city may or may not undertake designs and revisions for the downtown parks. They may or may not do other things on the mall. And I think Laura's initiative, she was a member of the BAR at the time, was to make sure that any signage was compatible with the design intent of the mall. And so that's where the signage came from, I think. So again, I'm just speaking personally. I would just kind of table it, other than if there's strong sentiment that it should be claimed as Vinegar Hill space, you could put up one sign. But I think it's an incomplete thing that we're not ready to implement.
So just quickly on the design, so the city has standards for its place or for wayfinding signs. And it's what you see, just like that photo of the one on the side of City Hall. It's got the text on one side and then the dogwood silhouette profile on the other, or however. But we have a design that is that a sign maker would follow. So it would be in that design. So that's why I think you all had asked what would the design be. We have it. The only thing we don't have is any text and graphics for an interpretive sign. I think, Jenny, you're right. I think that there's, and again, this, because we've talked about this a couple of times, there seems to have been a council was like, yeah, go do it. And I can even see from the old notes that we were like, okay, well, when we go to do it, are you going to fund it? So and that's where now it's like, oh, I don't even know how to get an estimate for it because of the way things work. But be that as it may, I think you all have a clean slate to suggest something else. And I think it would be helpful to, well, this is for you all to decide, but to not just let it go. I mean, maybe to report to council, here's a decision we've made, and here's a recommendation we have. And if they would like to pursue this, then we recommend that there be something incorporated into the CIP and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that way there's not like it just never happened kind of thing.
Right, and the code building intervened.
Yeah.
So the whole space is different now. And I think
Right.
we have a different community attitude towards Vinegar Hill, where I think the committee at that point in time when this first came up was seeing this as an omission because it was something that could have been realized as part of the Halpern plan and never was. And I think that there was an attitude of a more of a celebratory attitude about Vinegar Hill. We might now have more of a repentance attitude towards Vinegar Hill. I'm just not sure we're in the same space intellectually, emotionally, as we were when this first came up so many years ago.
I just feel like I remember hearing a few years ago, I think when we were working on the Blue Ribbon Commission, that the intent at this point, as you said, Jenny, was just to market, to claim it
Mhm.
as a space. And how it unfolds in the future can be done through a regular Parks and Rec process or whatever. So I guess the question for this committee is, does it make sense to claim the space now with a couple of pretty small and inexpensive interventions? Just to basically just to stake out the corners, as it were. And I can see some value in that, even if it's just those fabric panels on the light pole, just something that identifies it. And then we can easily remove them, change them. The design can adapt in the future. So I guess I'm not making a statement so much as asking a question. Does the committee feel like there's some value in staking out this space right now and identifying it as Vinegar Hill Park? So the idea does not get lost as
So
the
I think
planning proceeds.
I would say that there is value in doing that as sort of a phase one and just saying, here's where the park is. But I think that that's something that needs to be initiated from council. That I think the council needs to make a strong statement about that, saying that this space is important and we're not just going to do the paper operation of saying that this is now a park, but we're actually going to put money towards it in signing it initially, and then also funding a formal design process to redo the space into a real park, whatever that looks like for this space.
Or as a community, do we want, I mean, it's really a park within a park because the mall is designated as a park, right? So I guess I would insert here, maybe we should revisit it as Vinegar Hill Memorial Park.
Or historical park. And I think that's something that I've been
so
thinking.
People don't see it on a map and think they're going to take their kids there.
Yeah.
And
because I think that like I've been thinking about that with like,
or something.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that too with like Court Square Park, in that we could just put benches and flowers up, but it could also be a space that really addresses the significant history in that particular footprint and in Court Square overall. And I think that there's this interaction between parks and historic resources that, you know, exists, and we need to figure out how to incorporate the historical aspect into parks. I would say that Penn Park is also another one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We're like, you know, we need to better incorporate those things. And so, I mean, going back to this specific space, like this would be a great visible place to present the history of Vinegar Hill. Both, you know, I think I have some of the same sentiments that you do, Jenny, that it's sort of this space that in one way we can celebrate the community that was Vinegar Hill, but also it's a memorial to that racialized destruction.
Exactly.
And it's a very difficult thing to resolve, but it's a prominent location to express that.
And it always concerns me that people don't realize that last block of the mall in the West End is really part of Vinegar Hill.
Yeah.
It was the wider part of Vinegar Hill, but it's Vinegar Hill. Same with Market Street, Water Street, you know. It is a distinct geography of the city. And we should, I know we had one of these committee meetings several years ago, and Andrea Douglas was there, and she was also talking about, we always bemoan what we've lost, but we should be aware that we still have some of this fabric there. You know, so this is the last surviving part, physical above ground part of Vinegar Hill.
It's and I agree. I think, you know, being not from here, Vinegar Hill tends to be viewed as where the Staples is, or whatever it is now. And you really don't, until you look at the maps and stand there, realize that it's where the Omni is, it's where the federal courthouse is. It encroached into that split of West Main and Preston Avenue. And so, and this was that really a concentrated strip of businesses and residences, you know, with the street frontage. if I can make a recommendation and just play with this. So the banners are, we know, I can get prices for them because we know Park and Recs purchases them. So the idea of banners, I think, gives us gives you some flexibility with to establish that space, but also rotate content if you want, or but still to demarcate that space. And then there used to be one of those terrible black granite plaques on the concrete wall outside of the Omni. I don't know where it is. I don't know what happened to it, but it's similar to the ones that were at Fort Square. I think that I would suggest that you all consider the interpretive marker as an objective, as something that the committee should pursue and pursue getting installed. You do have funds, and I think it would really set the tone for that place. And I agree with it. To call it a park has this, although that's what the city called it, but it does have that suggestion of, hey, what a great place to come. And it really is about remembrance and memorialization. And I think that's going to fall back on you all to do, at least in the immediate term. So my suggestion would be we pursue a commitment to some sort of interpretive marker there, whatever, if you plaque scale, we could use the design that was developed for Fort Square. It's really up to you all. And then the idea of I'll talk to Park and Rec about some banners that can be put up using the wayfinding design that we have, and to demarcate that area, and that we then a recommendation to council, and again, this can either be with the Downtown Parks RFP, that this area be incorporated in that, or that this area be pursued separately, and refer back to that outline from the 2016 memo. So if I can toss that out there and let you all see what you.
Could we bring this up next time? It feels like.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say we only have a couple more minutes that we can allot to this, and that I think we need to have a more discussion on this before we pursue anything. And it's not urgent right now because the code building is still finishing up, and so we couldn't do anything anyway.
And I have one other question. Did the code building, when they got their permission to build and all that, was there anything in there that they were supposed to do toward the park? No.
We had
Discussion.
some opportunities, but
Materialized.
yeah, they just
And
didn't
here,
work.
okay.
It didn't happen. Could I just ask that before we go much further on this, that we do reach out to Kathy Johnson Harris, because we did have a subcommittee and she arrived. She had a number of commitments at the time and wasn't at a point where she wanted to apply to be on the full committee. And I just feel like it was another one of those processes interrupted, and that we should reach out to her, because she was going to reach out to other older people that she knew who had been residents and family members. And I just think we need to reach out to her.
Jenny, was she on the committee? Because I found out.
Well, we asked her to be on our subcommittee, but then again, I think we just never met again, or maybe we met again and she couldn't come that day.
Okay. I saw a reference to a member of Vinegar Hill with no name, or sorry, a former resident of Vinegar Hill who was a member of the subcommittee, but I didn't find any reference to who it was.
Right, she saw the subcommittee meeting on the city calendar, and so she attended the meeting, and everyone was very happy that she was there, and knew the area in a different way than I knew the area. So, and I was the only other person in the room, I guess, that had ever been to Vinegar Hill before it was demolished. So I just feel strongly we need to reach out to her. And if she's not at a point where she wants to engage, maybe she could suggest someone else.
I'd be glad to reach out to her. I know Kathy.
Thank you, Kay. Along those lines, I know at least 2 members of that subcommittee are no longer on this committee. So we may need to reconstitute that committee. Jenny, you were on that committee, or I guess are on that committee?
Beats me.
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
Would you care to be on that committee
Well,
now?
I felt some obligation as a person who at least lived in Charlottesville while Vinegar Hill was a built environment and shopped on Vinegar Hill and traveled through Vinegar Hill all the time. So I'm happy to fill that role, like a witness tree.
Okay. Is there anybody else who would be interested in being on that subcommittee? Jessica's indicating that she would. So when we get this started, we'll at least have 2 people who are on the committee. Robert, what were you gonna
I was
say?
just gonna, I know you all know this, but subcommittees, the walking tour map subcommittee is quite productive these days, meeting with designers and getting quotes. But otherwise, subcommittees are generally unable to meet without advance notice. So we can add members to the subcommittee, but they probably won't be able to meet or make much progress.
Good thing we
at least
only
in the
have a
immediate
committee
future.
of 2 people.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. So.
Okay, I think we will have a more discussion on that at the next meeting. Now I want to move us to the draft resolution thanking Ellen Wagner for service on the committee.
I so move.
And I second.
Okay, Jenny seconds.
Can you just read it into the record so
Let's-
everyone out there can
That
hear
would
it?
be good to read. Yes, so people can hear it.
Robert, would you like to read that?
Yes, I will. One moment. The resolution honoring Ellen Wagner reads, whereas Ellen Wagner was appointed in June 2013 by City Council to serve on the Historic Resources Committee and continued to serve through July 2021, and whereas the Historic Resources Committee was established by City Council to advocate for historic preservation, to promote an appreciation of local historic resources, both tangible and intangible, and to encourage and coordinate with appropriate municipal agencies, civic organizations, institutions, and individual scholars, the documentation and interpretation of local history. And whereas during Ellen's 8 years of service, the Historic Resources Committee accomplished its charge through projects that include the repair of the Fairfax Taylor headstone and rededication of the gravesite, facilitation of the initiative to restore and interpret the Daughters of Zion Cemetery rededication ceremonies for the Maplewood and Oakwood cemeteries, establishment of the Vinegar Hill Park, and the installation of a temporary exhibit expressing the history of Vinegar Hill, development of the downtown walking tour map, and providing funding and support for the historic survey of the 10th and Page neighborhood and for the examination of the unmarked graves of enslaved persons at Penn Park, and in many other ways, successfully promoted the committee's educational and advocacy mission. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Charlottesville's Historic Resources Committee thanks Ellen Wagner for her service to the city and its citizens, all of whom have benefited from her dedication and service.
All in favor? It's unanimous. That's great.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any staff updates in the next 5 minutes?
Just want to tell you that we have finalized at least the phase 1 of the cultural landscape study for the mall, working with DHR. They have, through their grant program, they will be coordinating in the initial phase, really will be the PIF phase of the evaluation. I think they're posting that, if not, it's been posted already. And so then we'll be looking to next spring, Robert and I will be looking to leverage some grant funding to continue that work towards the more complete landscape study and looking at the maintenance and preservation aspects of it. Second thing, Penn Park, we had an extraordinary week last week. Identified the first descendant family, and it happens to be someone I think a lot of you know. And was extraordinary. I don't know, you remember Stephen Waller used to work at the county. He managed their cell tower. He was the planner for that. And Sam Taller's research, and you all know Shelley Murphy and Sam Taller have been doing a lot of homework on this. And I saw the family name Waller, and I contacted Steve, and it was really powerful because he said to me that he said, my family's been going to family reunions at Penn Park for years, and we had no idea of that family connection there. And so, and what's really fascinating is that Mr. Taller is pretty certain that this link goes back to in an 1804 chancery record for Dr. George Gilmer after his death. There's a slave girl named Jenny, and we believe that is his, I think it's 4 or 5 time great grandmother. So it was pretty powerful. It made it very real. And then I've been hearing from Steve and some of his family, and we also are beginning to put identify a name and then sort of work forward in the family tree to find descendants. And that's part of what Robert and I had this meeting on Monday, and Ashley Marshall, who's the deputy city manager for the equity and diversity, to just discuss with her that this is where at Daughters of Zion we had Edwina and others that sort of coalesced into that preservation group. We need a plan for what to do with that at Penn Park, and I try to see how we can sort of take it beyond what limited resources we have. And I think another piece of that, and Phil, you touched on it earlier, is that we have at Penn Park, almost 300 acres of an original 430 acre property. We know that a lot of people were enslaved at, and we believe a lot of them are buried there. And the entire property should be interpreted properly, not just this burial site, the golf course. So, but again, that's something of a much larger scale than I think any of us have ever sort of anticipated being involved in a committee. I think it's going to take suggesting to the city a real commitment to examining, presenting, and interpreting the full history of Penn Park. So that's something I'm excited about. Even if it gets handed off to others, we'll be pursuing it. But so that's just my 2 quick updates on that. And I don't know, anything else going on, Robert? Sorry.
I just have one question. So for the DHR study on the mall, is there any opportunity for steering committee or stakeholder engagement, or just?
So this is it was a limited amount of funds the DHR had. So one of the first pieces of the study was that PIF level, that reconnaissance level, the evaluation of eligibility. There's a public component to that, but not the that next step of stakeholder discussion of the maintenance and preservation and evolution of the mall. So this is somewhat identical to what was done at 10th and Page and the other neighborhoods. We've done the historic surveys and
So
submitted PIF.
not necessarily any role for the HRC.
There certainly is. I mean, there is as with anything, we can contribute to what the body of work will be. But this first piece is, as I said, that PIF level, and then hopefully something that goes to the state review board with a recommendation of eligibility, and then the next steps would be those more distinct components of a cultural landscape study. So what's good is we had 50K. We were able to use 10 of that and 10 from the state, which means we still have 40. And if we can keep kind of, milking the available grants, stretch that into a robust CLR for the mall. But now, so I said, if you've got things to feed into the database, we have a lot in NDS as far as I have the drawings, of Mr. Halpin's drawings. We have a lot of reports, and we just want to make sure that those get incorporated in. But if there are photographs, I don't know, anything that we can begin to contribute to this. But as far as interpreting the space moving forward, I think that's going to be in the next phase.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Any agenda items for the next meeting that anyone wants to bring up? None?
I
Okay,
imagine that there will be a substantial discussion for the walking tour, if we're going to move forward with the just the contracting the designer.
Okay. And announcements? Okay. And with that, I conclude this meeting.